Around the year 1000, Murasaki Shikibu wrote The Tale of Genji, one of my favorite works of literature that cuts to the heart of Japanese court affairs, human emotion, and the fleeting nature of all things. In the year 2022, I read The Tale of Genji. Twice, and I liked it so much that it inspired me to create my own world-building project inspired by Heian, Japan. The Tale of Eternity is a world-building project I made in 6 months for myself and also for my portfolio. If you would like to hire me, my inbox is open. It's a story based on Heian, Japan about losing yourself in fiction, a miasma over the city, and the ephemerality of all things. For this project, I designed characters, created environment and set designs, illustrated splash art, and formatted everything for digital and print viewing. I had 2 main goals for this project. 1. To create a project focused on Heian, Japan. I see so many samurai, ronin, Edo period projects, or futuristic cyberpunk Japan projects, and I wanted to offer a different take on a Japan-inspired project. And 2. To create a new VizDev project for my portfolio before I go to Lightbox Expo, an entertainment industry artist-focused convention. The last time I did concept design work was a whole year ago, and I think I have improved since then. I hope. My secondary goals were to practice my technical skills in design and illustration, and to start integrating Blender into my workflow. I also wanted to make a physical art book of this project so I could hold it in my hands and sell it at conventions. But before I can draw, I gotta research, because it's really hard for me to draw things that I don't know about. After coming up with a loose idea, I like to research first, then see what ideas I can pull from the source material, rather than deciding on an idea first and then trying to shoehorn the material into my story. This way, my project is built on a solid foundation, and I don't feel like I'm trying to make the idea work. I believe that if I've done my research properly, there will be an idea for me to draw out. I'm just going to list out some of the things I've read and watched and played over the course of this project. The Tale of Genji, Genji, Genji Monogatari, Sending, Diary of Murasaki, Essays in Hojo, Onyo, Heike Story, Cosmology of Kyoto, Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. When I research for historical projects, I generally break my sources down into 3 categories. 1. Historical facts. For this project, I looked at when the capital moved to Kyoto and how long it stayed there, what people wore and when, what people ate, who was in power and for how long, the geography of the land, natural disasters, population distribution, government system, among other things. This was to put myself in the headspace of the time period, and as it turns out, Heian, Japan is really different from my life in 21st century America. 2. Contemporary works. These are things that were made during the time period, or at least made close to the time period, because very little from the Heian period actually survives today. For this project, I mostly looked at paintings, furniture, literature, and poetry. Here, I want to see what people thought of things then. What do they place value on in their work? For example, in Genji, Murasaki Shikibu dedicates a lot of time to describing the clothes of the characters, but almost nothing about their actual facial features. In the pillow book, Sei-an often comes back to what makes a worldly court lady. Both works discuss superstition and how undesirable anything outside the capital city was, but food and meals are rarely talked about in literature, as it was regarded as a vulgar subject. But watch out for survivorship bias. Most artworks that we have now are medieval reproductions, and almost no structures from the Heian period exist in present-day Kyoto. The structures we see today are reconstructions, and because there are no pictures of what Heian architecture looked like, I can't really tell the accuracy of them. And 3. Modern works and analysis. I'm looking at how people portray the Heian period now. For example, I appreciated how the Heike Story, an anime adaptation of The Tale of the Heike, recognized that it would be unable to adapt the entirety of the story in just 11 episodes, and instead added a bit of its own flavor in order to deliver on the themes of the original, the impermanence of all things and the cruelty of the battlefield. Modern scholarship has also given me new insights, like new interpretations of the spirit possession scene in Genji, or the consequences of trying to create resurrected versions of Heian art by covering up signs of decay. And very helpful was this website from the Kyoto Costume Institute, where they have a database of historical Japanese clothing reconstructions sorted by time period and who the clothing was meant for. I do this so that I can see how people interpret and recontextualize historical facts for their own works, which helps me figure out how to create my own ideas. By comparing facts to fiction, I can see where artists have drawn their inspiration from and what aspects of history they highlight or dim down. But that's so much reading. Too much to be able to read in 6 months. Because I lied. This project actually starts in July 2022, where I got an idea to create a project focused on Heian, Japan. At the time, I was working on my previous VizDev project under the auspices, so I just left the idea at that. In the meantime, I kept reading classic Japanese literature, The Tale of Genji. In the tale, Genji is born into the imperial family, demoted to commoner status, goes into exile, and then makes a glorious return to the imperial court by sweeping a painting contest. But I've always wondered, what would happen if Genji never returned to the court? What if he had to live out the rest of his days away from the capital city on the shores of Suma and Akashi? My answer to that was Amagi. Born into the imperial family but later exiled with no way to return. For her, I wanted exile to be a rebirth rather than being condemned to obscurity. Although she loses the life she had as a princess in the imperial court, I wanted to give her the strength to write a new future for herself. I also wanted to use this project as an opportunity to showcase different facets of Heian culture. I started with the 3 sacred treasures, and it turns out a lot of the things I wanted to draw also came in 3s. The 3 treasures, the sword, mirror, Magatama, 3 major religions, Shinto, Buddhism, and Onmyodo, 3 types of literature, stories, sutras, and folktales, and 3 creatures, the Kitsune, the Tengu, and the Oni. Each character is also attached to a specific literary work that was their main inspiration. I was able to create my 3 main characters by aligning each of the 3 aspects in a way that I liked and thematically made sense. Then, I added a miasma to my world. I like how the word sounds and initially thought it was just a cool concept, and I remember that the Sei-an city arc in Okami did something similar. But as I researched, I realized I could use it to highlight the contrast between the lives of the elite and literally everyone else. The Heian period was a period of peace, but also one of poverty for nearly everyone except the aristocracy. The members of the imperial court also took no interest in the affairs of the common people. At best, they were occasionally amusing to observe, like looking at a group of strange beasts. At worst, they tend to be regarded as members of a different species, uninteresting, useless, and unintelligible. It was impossible for me to find material written by common people because literacy was confined to the aristocracy, which is again another instance of survivorship bias. I also wanted to avoid idealizing the Heian period as the Goto Museum did in 2005 by creating resurrected versions of the illustrated Genji scrolls. They did this by hiding any traces of decay or wear with vibrant colors. I created a rule for myself. I could use rich colors in my work, but I would not avoid the decaying nature of this period. So, the miasma would help me create a dark and foreboding atmosphere for my world, and I could contrast the vibrant interior of the palace to the declining city. Figuring out the reason for the miasma turned out to be quite simple. There was a belief that pollution would be created after someone died if proper measures were not taken, which could lead to sickness, natural disasters, or other catastrophes. In fact, this is the reason why the capital was moved to Kyoto in the first place. I took this a step further for my story. If the emperor of the land died, then there would surely be a pollution like no other. This is not 100% historically accurate, but I was satisfied with this mix of historical fact and my own personal narrative. Finally, I created Empress, a disguise of 9 tails. Empress would take the former emperor's place after the emperor's death. Because the members of the court see that the ruler is still alive, even if the ruler looks different, and are too engrossed in their own fiction to care about that or the miasma, the proper rituals are not conducted for the former emperor. Therefore, the miasma stays over the city. But the reason Ninetales wants to be in the imperial palace in the first place is because they got a taste of reading once, and now they want more. But remember that literacy is limited to the imperial court. And to tie everything together, I made Ninetales the reason why Amagi was exiled in the first place. I was inspired by the iconic spirit possession scene from the Yugao chapter of Genji, where Yugao, one of Genji's lovers, is seized by the jealous spirit of another one of Genji's lovers, and dies. In my case, Ninetales attempted to possess Amagi to sneak into the court, but failed. This incident left Amagi with fox-like features, so she was removed from the imperial family. Having the false emperor be a fox in disguise felt like an elegant solution to both Amagi's backstory and the existence of the miasma. With my story set, it was time to move into actual design and illustration. So, it's June 2023, and there are 4 months till LBX. This was my to-do list at the start of the project. Based on how long it took me to finish each sheet for Under the Auspices, I quickly realized that it would be impossible to finish everything before LBX. So, I split production into 2 parts. Pre-LBX, I would work on character, environment, prop design, and post-LBX, I would do the illustrations. My reasoning was that I already had recent illustration work, but not any recent concept design work. I organized my references on a Miro board and started with the characters since I had roughly finalized their designs during pre-production. I like to start by drawing what I know. Here, I started with Amagi. After finishing Sei and Toru, I moved to environments and props. I created rough 3D mockups in Blender because I didn't want to figure out the perspective by hand. Finally, I drew some additional assets and formatted everything onto sheets so that it would look cohesive when viewed together. I finished drawing and formatting the core of the project with 2 weeks to spare before LBX. So I borrowed my friend's iPad, uploaded my portfolio images, and got on the plane to LA. I was lucky enough to win a portfolio review slot from the LBX portfolio reviews for concept art. My reviewer said that the costume design and environment design from this project were very strong, so I would consider this project a success on the portfolio side. But my reviewer also said he was sorry that I graduated this year, so I don't know what that says about society. I hung out with all my friends for a week, got to be starstruck at the Irie Pan mural, and had my first In-N-Out burger, which was perfectly mid. After I got back from LA, I worked on the illustration pieces, formatted the project for print, and made a physical art book. you'll see that the majority of this video is focused on research and planning. I think it would have been very difficult for me to come up with this project without researching as thoroughly as I did. Could I have been more efficient in my research? Absolutely. Unfortunately, I was doing a little thing called trying to finish my degree and graduate on time. And even though I talk about research a lot, at some point you gotta pick up the pen and start drawing because those deadlines will not wait for you. The experience you will gain from going through the cycle of planning, execution, reflection is so valuable, and going through these cycles multiple times has made me better at making these kinds of concept art projects. I think it's better to do multiple smaller projects and then work up to a big project rather than putting all your energy into one large project. My very first attempt at a concept art project in 2021 only had 6 sheets. Under the auspices, my first full project had 12 sheets. The Tale of Eternity has 22 sheets. This is by far my most complex project in terms of scope. Part of the reason I was able to execute successfully on Eternity was because I had previously completed these other projects, and I was able to reflect on what went well, what didn't, and what to improve for the next project. No project is going to be 100% perfect, and after every project I always end up thinking, I could have researched more, but I think I just have to take that energy into the next project. There are still tasks on the to-do list that I ended up not doing, since I felt they were not necessary to the overall project, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but who knows, maybe I'll draw these another time. I do think the great challenge of VizDev projects is making the final result greater than the sum of its parts. I could design a character or a background by itself, but it's a different task when I have an entire world and story to consider. It's been about a year since I finished Eternity, and I'm glad that I saw this project to the end. I was initially worried that this story wouldn't resonate with anyone because the Heian period isn't as well known as, say, Victorian England, but I really like it, and it seems like other people like it too. No matter how niche you think a subject might be, if you put the thought and care into your work, it will show, and people will appreciate it. Your audience is out there, I promise. And that's a retrospective on my second VizDev project, The Tale of Eternity. I'm gonna go work on my next project now. Bye!